Welcome to this deep dive brought to you by Safety One Source. We're basically your shortcut to the really crucial details in workplace safety. And today, we're zeroing in on some important clarifications from OSHA.
Yeah, specifically regarding their working surfaces and personal protective equipment standards, the fall protection stuff.
Exactly. So if you're a safety professional, maybe a risk manager, or frankly, anyone just looking to boost their safety knowledge, this is definitely for you.
Absolutely. Our aim today is to, really dig into several key letters of interpretation OSHA sent to the International Safety Equipment Association, ISEA, and also the Outdoor Advertising Association of America, the OAAA.
And here's that enforcement memo too, isn't there?
Oh yeah, the one about rope descent systems, RDS, very important. Yeah. We're going to pull out the core insights, help you understand compliance better, and ultimately keep your team safer.
Okay, sounds good. So let's unpack the first topic. It's about snap hooks and carabiners, right? A question from ISEA.
That's right. There seemed to be a bit of confusion maybe around the 3,600-pound gate strength requirement, the one in section 1910.140C8.
And what was the specific concern?
Well, it was quite interesting actually. ISEA pointed out that the way OSHA worded it initially, it could maybe be read as requiring proof testing for every single snap hook and carabiner gate.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and their concern, which is, totally valid in the safety field, was that doing that kind of test over and over could actually weaken these critical parts.
That makes complete sense. You test something designed for safety to the point it becomes less safe. Not ideal.
Not at all. So OSHA listened. They clarified that, yes, ISEA's interpretation of the potential problem was correct.
Okay.
They confirmed they never actually intended for every single gate to be individually strength tested.
So no need for that repetitive testing then?
Exactly. Their goal was, and still is, to align with the ANSI standard. That's ANSI Z359.12/2009. This is a really important point for safety pros. It saves time, resources, and avoids potentially damaging the gear.
All right, good clarification.
Yeah.
But they mentioned something else too, about an amendment.
Yes, absolutely. OSHA mentioned they're planning to issue a technical amendment.
Yeah.
And this amendment will spell out that the gate needs to be designed to withstand that 3,600 pounds without the gate separating from the nose more than 0.125 inches.
So it's about the design strength and how securely it closes under load.
Precisely. Not about destructively testing every single one that comes off the line.
Got it. That really clears things up. Okay, so moving on. ISEA also had a question about training, specifically who counts as a qualified person to train workers on fall hazards and equipment. This refers to section 1910.3A2.
Yes, and this hits on a really critical aspect, making sure the trainers themselves are truly competent.
Right.
ISEA noted what they saw as maybe a slight difference between OSHA using qualified person in the general industry standard versus the term competent person that's used in the construction fall protection standard.
I can see how that might cause confusion.
Yeah, and they also brought up the definitions in the ANSI Z359.2 2017 standard, which kind of distinguishes between a trainer and a competent person.
So for listeners maybe dealing with both general industry and construction sites, how does OSHA actually define a qualified person? Can we nail that down?
Sure. So according to OSHA's own definition, in section 1910.21b, a qualified person is someone who, and this is key, through a recognized degree, certificate, professional standing, or extensive knowledge, training, and experience.
Okay, so multiple paths.
Right. Has successfully shown they can solve problems related to the subject matter, the work, or the project. It's quite broad in how you can demonstrate that qualification.
Okay, so it's not just about having a piece of paper, necessarily. Experience counts. How does that mesh with the competent person in construction and those ANSI standards then?
Well, OSHA's view is that their requirements are actually pretty consistent between the two.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Even though the construction standard uses competent person for training, OSHA clarifies that this person also needs to be qualified in the specific areas they're teaching, and their idea of qualified lines up with that general industry definition we just talked about.
Okay, that helps bridge the gap. So let's say you have someone who meets the ANSI standard for being a fall protection trainer, and they also meet the ANSI standard for being a competent person. Does OSHA see that person as qualified under their rule?
Yes, they tackled that head on. OSHA explicitly said that a trainer who meets all the qualifications for trainers laid out in ANSIAS Z490.1 2016,
right,
and also meets all the requirements for competent persons from ANSIAS Z359.2 2017, that person will be considered a qualified person under their final rule.
That's very clear guidance then. It helps you identify the right people.
Exactly.
Could you just briefly touch on what some of those responsibilities and training points are for a competent person under that ANSIZ 359.2 standard? Just the highlights.
Sure. Let's see. The standard covers things like doing hazard surveys, developing fall protection procedures, making sure equipment is installed right and inspected regularly, verifying training's done, and importantly, having the authority to stop work if things look unsafe.
Right. That stop work authority is huge.
It is. And their training needs to cover a lot of applicable standards: how to survey hazards, equipment use and inspection, system assessment, rescue procedures. It's pretty comprehensive.
Okay, so someone with that depth of knowledge and responsibility definitely sounds like they fit OSHA's idea of being able to solve problems in fall protection. Great clarification for safety pros needing to source trainers.
Absolutely.
Right. Let's switch gears a bit. Let's talk about the questions from the Outdoor Advertising Association of America, OAAA. These were about fixed ladders, I believe.
Yes, fixed ladders, particularly applying the rules to ladders over 24 feet high under Section 1910.28B9. They had some real-world scenarios.
Like what?
Well, one key one was, if you use a full-body harness and double lanyards, staying connected 100% of the time to a fixed ladder that has proper anchor points, does that count as a personal fall arrest system?
And OSHA said,
yes, they confirmed it does, provided, of course, that all the parts, the harness, the lanyards, the anchorages, meet all the specific requirements in Section 1910.140.
which includes...
crucially, things like the lanyards needing that minimum 5,000-pound braking strength, and the anchorages, which is the ladder structure itself, in this case, having to support at least 5,000 pounds for each person attached.
Got it. Strength requirements are key. Now, OAA also asked about measuring that 24-foot height trigger. Outdoor ad structures, those ladders often start way above ground level, right?
Exactly. So the question was, do you measure just the ladder itself or from the ground up to the very top?
And the answer is?
OSHA was very clear. You measure from the ground or the lower level all the way to the top rung of the fixed ladder.
The very top.
The very top. It's about the total distance someone could potentially fall while climbing. So even if the ladder starts, say, 10 feet up but goes another 15 feet, that's 25 feet total from the ground. Fall protection is needed for the whole climb.
Okay, that nails down the measurement. It's total fall distance. What about ladders starting on platforms, like way up high, 20, 15, maybe even 200 feet up, which you see in outdoor advertising?
Yeah, that's a common setup.
So does the 24-foot count start from the ground or from that platform?
Okay, this is an important distinction. OSHA said if the platform is big enough, large enough, that it genuinely stops someone from falling past it or falling onto it and then rolling off an unguarded side.
Right, like a substantial working platform.
Exactly. Then, yes, you can measure the 24 feet from the platform surface up to the top of the ladder section above it. However...
Oh, there is a however.
There is. OSHA specifically looked at the OAA's example of platforms maybe only being, say, 2 to 4 feet wide.
Which isn't very big.
Not really. And OSHA basically said in that case, they believe someone could still fall past that narrow platform. So for those smaller platforms, the 24-foot measurement still has to start all the way down at ground level. Okay,
so a narrow little perch doesn't reset the clock, so to speak. Good to know for anyone on those structures. OAAA also asked about that physical capability evaluation for climbing fixed ladders without fall protection.
Ah, yes, that was in the initial rule under Section 1910.28 B10.2 and 1910.29 AS. It allowed employers to assess if someone was physically up to climbing without fall protection.
Did OSHA specify how to do that assessment, like medical tests?
No, they clarified they weren't going to mandate any specific medical evaluations for that. But more importantly, that whole provision, it essentially became irrelevant after November 19, 2018.
Because
the updated final rule kicked in, mandating that all fixed ladders over 24 feet high must have proper fall protection systems installed. So the idea of climbing without protection just isn't an option anymore under the rule.
Right, so that physical evaluation clause is basically history now. Everything over 24 feet needs a system. Got it. Okay, let's look at another query. This one from AGI MFS. It was about fixed ladders that already have cages and maybe metal straps on the landing platforms and guardrails.
Right, a specific configuration.
Yeah. Their question was, do you still need a personal fall arrest system or a ladder safety system with all that already in place.
And OSHA provided a potentially useful clarification here.
Mm-hmm.
They basically said if that cage and the straps on the landing platform work together to effectively stop someone from falling over the edge of that platform down to a lower level,
Okay.
and if the potential fall distance from where you start climbing up to that platform is 24 feet or less, then no, you don't necessarily need an additional personal fall arrest or ladder safety system.
So in that specific setup,
Yeah.
the cage and straps can be enough, potentially saving the need for harnesses and lanyards on that section.
Potentially, yes. It offers an alternative compliance path for certain designs.
Interesting. Okay, finally, let's really dig into that enforcement guidance OSHA gave out about rope descent system RDS anchorages. Sounds like the initial deadline caused some headaches.
It did, yeah. The rule originally set November 20th, 2017, as the date by which building owners and employers had to ensure all RDS anchorages were properly inspected, tested, and certified before use. That's 1910.27B1.
But there was a problem.
The problem was a shortage, essentially. A limited number of qualified people available who could actually do that specialized inspection, testing, and certification work.
A bottleneck. So how did OSHA handle that in terms of enforcement?
They issued an enforcement memo. It gave guidance to their field officers, the CSHOs, on how to assess whether building owners and employers were making good faith efforts, showing due diligence.
Okay, so what did that look like for building owners? What did they need to show?
For building owners, OSHA wanted to see things like documented proof they'd actually contacted qualified persons to do the work, evidence of agreements or contracts being in place, maybe anticipated completion dates, proof of real effort to get these qualified people booked, and importantly, records of telling employers if their anchorages weren't certified yet.
So basically proving they were actively trying to comply. And what about the employers using the RDS? What was expected of them?
Their main job was to get and keep written confirmation from the building owner about the anchorage certification status before using them.
Right.
If the anchorages weren't certified yet, employers needed to look at alternatives. Could they use powered platforms, scaffolds, aerial lifts, that sort of thing?
Try to avoid using the uncertified anchors if possible.
Exactly. But if those alternatives weren't feasible and they had to use RDS with uncertified anchorages, then they had to implement extra precautions.
Like what?
Things like having a qualified person thoroughly check the anchorage condition and estimate its strength, and then having continuous supervision by a qualified person whenever the RDS was actually in use on those anchors.
So a very hands-on supervised approach if using untested anchors.
It sounds like OSHA really tried to be practical about it, offering some leeway during that initial phase if everyone was genuinely trying to comply and keeping worker safety paramount.
And I remember reading that any potential citations related to this RDS anchorage rule had to be reviewed higher up.
That's correct. All potential citations under Section 1910.27B1 required review by OSHA's Directorate of Enforcement Programs.
Which kind of emphasizes how seriously they took it, but also aimed for consistency, I suppose.
I think so, yes. It ensured a consistent approach across the country while they worked through that initial period.
Okay, one last thing before we wrap up. We've thrown around a lot of terms. It seems really crucial for safety pros to, really know the definitions in OSHA 1910.21, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely fundamental. You can't apply these rules correctly if you don't understand the basic terminology. Things like anchorage, fall hazard, qualified person, we talked about that one, but also fixed ladder, ladder safety system, lower level, personal fall arrest system.
They're all defined right there.
Yes, comprehensively laid out in Section 1910.21b. Getting a solid grip on those definitions is really the foundation for compliance with all these walking working surface and fall protection standards.
Okay, great point. So just to quickly summarize the big takeaways.
Yeah.
We learned individual gate testing for snap hooks isn't required, just design strength.
Right.
We clarified that someone meeting ANSI competent person and trainer standards is considered OSHA qualified. We got details on measuring the 24-foot fixed ladder threshold from the ground, usually, unless there's a very large platform, and that cages might suffice sometimes.
Yep.
And we looked at OSHA's flexible but diligent enforcement approach for RDS anchorages during the initial rollout.
Exactly. And the key message really for all safety professionals listening is just stay informed, keep checking OSHA's website.
Yeah, it's the definitive source for the latest interpretations, any amendments, new guidance.
Yeah.
And we'll put links to OSHA's site in the show notes for you, of course. So, as we finish up, here's something to think about. Given these clarifications we've discussed, what immediate tweaks or maybe reviews do you need to make in your own safety protocols? How can you ensure you're fully compliant and providing the absolute highest level of safety around working surfaces and fall protection?
Good question to ponder.
Definitely. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive presented by Safety One Source.